by Alan McLeod at Mint Press News. Link it down below. Highly recommend Alan's work and that of Mint Press News in general. This one's titled Saagar and Enjeti, the Pseudo-Populist Mainlining Neocon Ideas into Progressive Politics. While he is undeniably a charismatic and confident host, Saagar Enjeti's shtick is remarkably similar to that of his former employer, Tucker Carlson, who rails against elites while being one of them. Washington. Saagar Enjeti and Crystal Ball, the new king and queen of alternative media, after having just quit The Hill to go fully independent, their new show, Breaking Points, immediately debuted at #1 in the global politics podcast charts, comfortably overtaking well-established brands like Pod Save America, that's also trash, Ben Shapiro Show, also trash. They even received the ultimate plug with an appearance on an endorsement from Joe Rogan. Breaking Points is effectively a copy of Rising, and Enjeti and Ball's show on the Hill. Rising had the look and tone of a cable news show with two well-presented and attractive hosts chatting to guests in a brightly lit studio, but had far more substance, featuring stories and points of view that are completely ignored in the rest of the corporate media. Two invited on a range of informative guests, the caliber of whom is simply not found in cable news, thus had a jarringly subversive quality appealed to viewers, as if the two smuggling forbidden but increasingly popular ideas, all while maintaining a polished corporate feel. Talking about Breaking Points, there's a tweet from him. Ball is a progressive, while Enjeti is a conservative. Nevertheless, both present themselves as populists who have a lot in common, something that was the central message of their best-selling book, The Populist Guide to 2020, A New Right and Left Horizon. But I disagree. You can't be, right-wing and be a populist, because by being right-wing, you're not going to be for the working class. You're not going to be for the oppressed, the vulnerable, and marginalized. And to be for those things, you have to be a populist. So I disagree. I don't think Enjeti's a populist. While Ball's political outlook could be described as politically standard, Bernie Sanders-style populism, Enjeti is more of an enigma. While he identifies as a conservative Republican, he also labels himself... you can't be a conservative Republican and also be pro-worker, pro-union. Those positions are very... This isn't a MAGA shirt. This is Make America Not Racist for the first time. Get yours at Melanin Apparel. Key to his appeal is convincing progressive audiences that although conservative, he is still political outsider views not too dissimilar from their own. Yet a look into Enjeti's background and professional career suggests otherwise. He is very much an insider, is pulling similar trick to so many Republicans of late who are rebranding as anti-elite, anti-deep state warriors, all the while mainstreaming some highly problematic viewpoints to his... I mean, for fuck's sake, he worked for Tucker fucking Carlson. Who, he probably got that idea, from him. I'm going to be, railing against the elites. I'm an outsider. I'm not part of the, upper crust of, the DC society, DC political elite. I'm one of the working people, while, being the complete opposite. Neocon in the making. Before becoming a populist media personality, Enjeti appeared to be training for the role of deep state official, pursuing an undergraduate degree at George Washington University and a master's degree in security at Georgetown, both D.C. area colleges, well known for their connections to the national security state. Enjeti also decided to study counterterrorism studies at Israel University, IDC, Herzliya. He decided to study counterterrorism studies at an Israeli university. So where you learn to, prop up the occupying force and continue the ethnic cleansing and genocide against the Palestinian people. Seems pretty fucking mainstream doing that type of shit. Jesus. Situated on a former military base, the university's board hosts a former head of Mossad and ex-Prime Minister Ehud Barak. Meanwhile, its international advisory board is replete with U.S. national security leaders such as Robert Hutchins, former chairman of the National Intelligence Council, Stephen Peter Rosen, one-time director of political military affairs at the White House National Security Council, and ex-CIA chief James R. Woolsey. There they are with Rojan. Coffee or die. I've never been a big coffee fan. What about you? I've never really felt the need for it, I guess, and I can't stand the taste. Modules in profiling terrorists, strategy and deterrence, Arab language, Iranian studies, a course called Hezbollah, a hybrid terrorist org. Jesus. Yes, this is an institution that trains Israeli and American intelligence officials, not a radical populist outsiders. Agreed. Counterterrorism Studies Department is headed by Dr. Boaz Ganor, an Israeli government advisor. Okay, so that's where some of his study and schooling came from. Doesn't seem to have a very populist bent there, as McLeod points out. Gonna study war some more. While still in university, Enjeti landed a job at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, writing policy briefs about the conflict in Afghanistan and analyzing the moves and strengths of the Taliban. ISW is a notoriously hawkish think tank funded by weapons contractors like Raytheon, General Dynamics, Dynacorp. Jesus. So, Institute for Study of War, which is where Enjeti got a job at. This is somebody describing it. The Institute for the Study of War is one of the most enmeshed DC think tanks in terms of active military policy within the U.S. government. It's probably the most influential military-centric think tank in Washington. It's also encouraging war, which should be obvious by its name. But he is somehow a populist. He's anti-establishment when he seems to be very pro-war inclined, which is very establishment. They're supporting the war in Iraq. The wheel and the drive towards the war in Iraq call for more aggressive actions in Syria and other nations. Jesus. It's a long article, so I'm not going to read all of it, but again, I'll link the full piece down below. So after he left the Institute for Study of War, Enjeti later moved to the Hudson Institute, an equally neoconservative and pro-war think tank where he worked as a media fellow until last year. Like the ISW, Hudson takes money from a cavalcade of weapons manufacturers, including Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and Lockheed Martin. So it seems like all of these places he has worked at get a lot of money from the military-industrial complex. It's not very populist or anti-establishment of him, is it? Standard bearer for establishment Republicans, seen by mere glance at senior figures. Longtime Republican official, their CEO. Senior Vice President Scooter Libby, Cheney's chief of staff. Pompeo, senior position. Piece of shit. Tom Cotton. Not sure who that is. Until recently, Enjeti's second podcast, Realignment, was an official Hudson publication. Well, it doesn't seem very populist, does it? It doesn't seem very anti-establishment. Not very pro-worker, especially for the working class all across the globe that is, killed and maimed and brutalized every day by the U.S. empire and the war machine. Jesus. Let's see, here we go. Martin's view. Before Saagar was the co-host of Rising. Who's this Martin? Oh, that was from the documentary filmmaker I read the quote from before. Before Saagar was the co-host of Rising with Crystal, Rising was not a populist themed political show at all. It was not really that progressive. When Saagar got there, it almost seemed like it became a TV show version of his podcast. Enjeti presents himself as an anti-war populist, but again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense working at the Hudson Institute, doing a podcast with them, working at the Institute for the Study of War, studying counterterrorism at this Israeli university. Doesn't seem very anti-war. Entire reason I'm interested in politics is because of 9/11 opposition to the war in Iraq. It is my North Star and always will be, he said in a recent episode of Rising, but it's difficult to square with the fact he chose to study counterterrorism, in Israel, and to work for the two most hawkish neocon think tanks in America. The very same think tanks whose principles laid the groundwork for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and Enjeti claims to so vociferously to oppose. An anti-war outsider could choose to work for the likes of the Kagan family does not compute. Hudson obsession. Yeah, and his viewpoint on China is just is horrible. I mean, it's horrible. Very, very right wing. The word China and its derivatives appear 137 times. This in regards to Hudson in the org's most recent annual report, featuring on virtually every page. The lab leak stuff. Independent mining government Taiwan, I guess, gives a lot of money. Between 2015 and 2019, the org's revenue more than quadrupled to $57.1 million. Doesn't disclose how much Taiwan is giving them, except to say the island has been on its list of higher tier donors every year since it began divulging their sponsor in 2015. Not coincidentally, Hudson is among the most vociferous supporters of greater Taiwanese independence. And they also get money from Japan. The Populist Guide to Hating China. He does definitely. Enjeti, I'm not so much sure about Crystal Ball, but he has a very strong hate and dislike for China. Many critics have argued that true economic populism cannot be conservative, which is exactly what I was saying at the start, and that right-wing populist variants attempt to unite majority around issues of religion, Modi's India, or race, Nazi Germany, deflecting popular frustration downwards, using minorities as scapegoats for the country's problems. Enjeti has tried to square the circle of raging against the elites while leaving the system in place by blaming so many Americans failing to China. Yeah, it's not capitalism. It's not white supremacy in the United States. It's not the problems of U.S. imperialism, this settler colonial state. It's China. They're the reasons all of these bad things are happening to you. It's not maybe massive wealth and income inequality. It's not that we have the world's largest prison population. It's maybe that we don't have universal health care, or that we have to go into massive amounts of debt to get an education. It's not that we have 700 military bases, or 800 I believe, in 100 countries. It's not that stuff that our government has control over. It's what China is doing to us. It's China. They're bad. They're fucked up. CCP, horrible. All 90 million members, they're bad. Combining populist rhetoric with Hudson-style foreign policy in a Populist Guide to 2020, he claims that the malaise the country is in can be explained as a no small part due to China's economic. I mean, Jesus Christ, that is fucking unhinged. The bad guys in Enjeti's story of American corporations recoding eastward to use hyper-exploited Asian workers are not the corporations themselves nor the U.S. Gov, but the Chinese Communist Party deviously convincing businesses to do so. A classic bait and switch. How much just brainwashed with American exceptionalism do you have to believe to be able to believe that all the problems that the U.S. is facing is because China's the bad actor here? I mean, again, it's so ridiculous. This is not a populist at all. This is completely establishment rhetoric. There's nothing whatsoever populist or popular about this. Corporations and the billionaire class sold us out a very long time ago. Of course, he's not going to talk about capitalism, right? He states, sounding like Bernie Sanders for claiming that doing business with China is akin to American monopolies' tacit cooperation with the Nazi regime before the outbreak of World War II. He's comparing China to the Nazi regime before the outbreak of World War II. Jesus. People who control our banks, who control what we see, what we laugh at, who we watch play sports, and now beholden some very bad people in Beijing. Beijing isn't shy about using its economic entanglements with us to try and force American citizens to behave however they. What the fuck does it even mean, dude? He's just making shit up again with no evidence, like a TYT style smear here going on, like the TYT did to Aaron Mate. I mean, you know the book is gonna be fucking dog shit if this guy likes it. Again, his politics very fucking similar to Tucker Carlson's, and that's should be pretty problematic. Jesus. Tucker Carlson, here you go. Him back in the day. Working class people of all colors have a lot more in common, infinitely more in common with each other than they do with some overpaid MSNBC anchor, even though he, works for Fox and is also equally overpaid, for spouting his reactionary, white supremacist, xenophobic worldview. And if you're allowed to think about that for long enough, you might start to get unauthorized ideas about economics. That would be disruptive to very lucrative status quo. That's Carlson. Only to redirect legitimate anger away from capitalism towards woke college students, gypsies or Latino immigrants. For decades, however, Carlson was a preppy bow tie wearing, out of the closet elitist who described ordinary Americans as peasants. The stepson of the heir of the Swanson's food empire and the son of Dick Carlson, the head of Voice of America and U.S. ambassador, Tucker reveled in how extraordinarily loaded his family was, condemning Bill O'Reilly's faux populism as phony, only to switch exactly the same shtick when he replaced O'Reilly on Fox News in 2017. The old bait and shtick. Yeah. He's an imperialist. And again, there's nothing populist or pro-worker about being a fucking imperialist. The working class in the United States suffers, as well as obviously the working class globally who faces, the wrath of the U.S. empire. I'm not for a multipolar world. I want to be the only blue water navy. I don't want the Chinese ruling the Straits of Malacca, or the South China. He doesn't want China ruling the South China Sea. I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. China virus, trying to blame everything. Again, just trying to blame everything on China. The soliloquy about wrestler John Cena correcting his inaccurate statement that Taiwan is an independent country, Enjeti again tried to launder aggression against China as a progressive position. The elites of this country do not work for us. Do they really like us and are completely for sale? He roared. For sale to whom? Not to the likes of Jeff Bezos, the government, giant corporate interest, but to the authoritarian and cultist Chinese Communist Party. I mean, frankly, I wish what he was saying was true, because if they're actually bought and paid for by the Chinese Communist Party, our country would be headed in a lot better direction than it is. But as McLeod points out, it's in the hands of the capitalist class of people like Bezos and these huge corporations. They are able to control the very speech that comes out of the most powerful people in I mean, goddamn, how just drunk on American exceptionalism, how much do you have to really have been tricked to hate China to think they're the reasons that America is such a shithole country? Jesus. Undisclosed in all this gigantic conflict of interest inherent in the fact that Enjeti's salary at the Hudson Institute came courtesy of piles of cash donated by the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Let's see. Sam Sachs. The funniest thing about the segment claiming that the media's failure to give legitimacy to lab leak theory is based as WMD failures. It starts by Saagar citing the Wall Street Journal's report on long-buried intelligence within the U.S. government. So, like, CIA talking points? Like...
I am not for like a multipolar world. And a lot of socialists that I've argued with, they are very comfortable and okay with multipolarity. I mean, they've laughed at me.
So what is that? So what is multipolar?
Right, so they've laughed at me when I'm like, God, we'll be doomed to Europe. And they're like, oh, well, in Europe they have healthcare. I'm like, yeah, but they also have no say over the global affairs of the world. I want to run.
The U.S. Again, this is showing his fucking imperialist worldview. The United States should not have a say in the world. Okay? It's for those countries to decide what that looks like. Just like right now, the U.S. has no fucking business telling Cuba what to do. The U.S. only needs to keep their hands off Cuba. Same thing in Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Iraq, Iran, Bolivia, ... But no, Enjeti, he wants the U.S. empire to stretch its tentacles across the fucking globe. It's not populist.
I want to be the only blue water navy. I don't want the Chinese ruling the Straits of Malacca and the South China Seas, because I believe America, for me, it's about freedom. America and
it's about freedom. Freedom to Saagar Enjeti is the U.S. empire raining death and destruction all around the globe because he doesn't think countries can, make their own decisions, chart their own course. Like, he's a fucking imperialist. Again, there's nothing pro-worker or populist about that. And again, can't be on the right and be a populist. Being a populist, you have to be for the working people, both domestically and internationally. He clearly isn't.
Citizens are less free with a global authoritarian superpower like...
A global authoritarian superpower. Again, a huge fucking case of projection. The global authoritarian superpower is the fucking United States, you fucking whack job. We have 800 plus military bases in 100 countries. How many does China have? Let's Google it real quick. I'm going to say 0. How many foreign bases does... Only one they have one base in Djibouti, apparently. The U.S. has 870 countries, despite closing several hundred. Okay, but China's the real authoritarian here with one base in Djibouti. Jesus Christ. China will use Wall Street to control Joe Biden. What? Bloomberg a Chinese asset. I mean, Jesus Christ, just his anti-China rhetoric is just of insane proportions. Lab leak theory, talking about that bullshit, even though there's no evidence to support that. So again, just trying to place all the blame on China without actually, addressing the root causes of issues in the United States, like capitalism, white supremacy, yeah, so again, don't be fucking fooled. Enjeti, not a populist, not pro-worker. Just as McLeod's title says, pseudo-populist mainlining neocon ideas into progressive politics. That's it. He's a, kind of useful idiot in that sense. Like the video if you like the damn video. Subscribe for more content. Peace. Much love. All part of the